welcome back to the Bible in 90 Days. We're on day 27. Can you believe it, man? We're going to be almost through 2nd Kings today, and then we're into Chronicles, I think, tomorrow. And see, yeah, we start 1st Chronicles. Now, Chronicles starts with a whole lot of genealogy. I think there's 9 chapters, 8 or 9 chapters of straight genealogy, so... This reading that we've been doing, 1st and 2nd Kings, is like reaching the climax of the biblical thing, and it's not a good climax that the people of Israel are coming to. If you can't tell, there's a lot of good things, and it's full of excitement. There's a whole lot of exciting stories. I don't know if you've been watching these videos or if you've been reading on your own. I hope you're not just reading the words, because these stories are exciting. They make me laugh, and they make me cry, and they make my heart move, and it's incredible. You know, the Bible it's just incredible, guys. But today we've got some really cool stories. Ahab's family being killed, and then the servants of Baal, man. We're going to go all the way to chapter 20 today, so we've got the biggest part of Kings, of 2nd Kings, going down today, and it's not familiar reading. This isn't like the territory that preachers preach and teachers teach in. If you've been in a Sunday school class through Lifeway, I mean, a lot of these stories are going to be new to you, because some of them are just really too raunchy that you wouldn't have learned them in children's church, that's for sure. This, like I was saying before about, Jehu. Nobody talks a whole lot about Jehu, because Jehu he was crazy. But anyhow, let's jump right into the word today. 2nd Kings chapter 10. Now there were in Samaria 70 sons of the house of Ahab. So Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria, to the officials of Jezreel, to the elders and to the guardians of Ahab's children. He said, You have your master's sons with you, and you have chariots and horses, and a fortified city and weapons. Now, as soon as this letter reaches you, choose the best and the most worthy of your master's sons, and set him on his father's throne. Then fight for your master's house. Verse 4. But they were terrified and said, If 2 kings could not resist him, how can we? So the palace administrator, the city governor, the elders, and the guardians sent this message to Jehu. We are your servants, and we will do anything you say. We will not appoint anyone as king. Do whatever you think is best. Then Jehu wrote them a second letter, saying, If you are on my side and will obey me, take the heads of your master's sons and come to me in Jezreel by this time tomorrow. Now the royal princes, 70 of them, were with the leading men of the city who were rearing them. And when the letter arrived, these men took the princes and slaughtered all 70 of them. And they put their heads in baskets and sent them to Jehu in Israel. When the messenger arrived, he told Jehu, They have brought the heads of the princes. Then Jehu ordered, Put them in 2 piles at the entrance to the city gate until morning. The next morning, when Jehu went out, he stood before all the people and said, You are innocent. It was I who conspired against my master and killed him. But who killed all these? Verse 10. Know then that not a word of the Lord has spoken against the house of Ahab will fail. The Lord has done what he announced to do through his servant Elijah. So Jehu killed everyone in Jezreel who remained of the house of Ahab, as well as all his chief men, his close friends and his priests. leaving him no survivor. Verse 12. Jehu then sent out and towards Samaria. At Beth Eked of the shepherds, he met some relatives of Ahaziah, king of Judah, and asked, "Who are you?" They said, "We are the relatives of Ahaziah, and have come down to greet the families of the king and of the queen mother." "Take them alive," he ordered. So they took them alive and slaughtered them by the well of Beth Eked. 42 of them. He left no survivor. After he left there, he came to Jehonadab, son of Rechab, who was on his way to meet him. Jehu greeted him and said, "Are you in accord with me as I am with you?" "I am," Jehonadab answered. "If so," said Jehu, "give me your hand." So he did, and Jehu helped him over up into the chariot. Jehu said, "Come with me to see my zeal for the Lord." Then he had him ride along in his chariot. And when Jehu came to Samaria, he killed all who were left of Ahab's family. He destroyed them according to the word of the Lord spoken to Elijah. Verse 18. Then Jehu brought all the people together and said to them, "Ahab served Baal." I'll say Baal for you, Miss Pat. "Ahab served Baal a little. Jehu will serve him much. Now summon all the prophets of Baal and all his Baal, and all his servants and his priests. See that no one is missing, because I am going to hold a great sacrifice for Baal. Anyone who fails to come will no longer live." But Jehu was acting deceptively in order to destroy the servants of Baal. Verse 20. Jehu said, "Call an assembly in honor of Baal." So they proclaimed it. Then he sent the word of Israel, and all the servants of Baal came. Not one stayed. They crowded into the temple of Baal until it was full, from one end to the other. And Jehu said to the keeper of the wardrobe, "Bring robes for all the servants of Baal." So he brought out robes for them. Then Jehu and Jehonadab, son of Rechab, went to the temple of Baal. And Jehu said to the servants of Baal, "Look around and see that see that no one who serves the Lord," that's Yahweh, "is here with you. Only servants of Baal." So they went in to make sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now Jehu had posted 80 men outside with this warning: "If anyone lets any of the men I am placing in your hands escape, it will be your life for his life." 25. As soon as Jehu had finished making the burnt offering, he offered the guards and officers, "Go and kill him. Let no one escape. Go in and kill them. Let no one escape." So they cut them down with the sword. The guards and the officers threw the bodies out, and then entered the inner shrine of the temple of Baal. They brought the sacred stone of the temple of Baal and burned it. They demolished the sacred stone of Baal and tore down the temple of Baal. And the people have used it for a latrine to this day. So Jehu destroyed Baal worship in Israel. However, he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which had caused Israel to commit the worship of the golden calves at Bethel and Dan. Remember that he had set those up. Verse 30. The Lord said to Jehu, "Because you have done well in accomplishing what is right in my eyes, and have done to the house of Ahab all that I had in mind to do, your descendants will sit on the throne of Israel to the fourth generation." Yet Jehu was not careful to keep the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam. Isn't that funny? Which he had caused Israel to commit. Verse 32. In those days the Lord began to reduce the size of Israel. Hazael overpowered the Israelites throughout their territory, east of the Jordan, in all the land of Gilead, the region of Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh, from Aroer to the Arnon Gorge, through Gilead to Bashan. 34. As for the other servants of Jehu's reign, all he did, and all his achievements, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Jehu rested with his ancestors and was buried in Samaria. And Jehoahaz, his son, succeeded him as king. The time of Jehu reigned over Israel and Samaria was 28 years. Man, if you can count Jehu as a righteous king in Israel, which, I mean, he was the most righteous of them, but nobody counts him as one of the righteous kings. That's as close as they got. Chapter 11. When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw her son dead, she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King of Joram and the sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the royal princes, who were about to be murdered. She put him and his nurse in a bedroom to hide him from Athaliah, so he was not killed. He remained hidden with his nurse at the temple of the Lord for 6 years, when Athaliah ruled the land. Verse 4. In the 7th year of Jehoiada sent for the commanders of the of the units of 100, the Carites and the guards, and had them brought to him at the temple of the Lord. He made a covenant with them to put under the oath at the temple of the Lord. And then he showed them the king's son. He commanded them, saying, "This is what you are to do. You are in the 3 companies. You who are in the 3 companies that are going on duty on the Sabbath, a third of you guarding the royal palace, a third at the sewer gate, and a third at the gate behind the guard, who take turns guarding the temple. And you who are in the other 2 companies that normally go off Sabbath duty are to guard the temple for the king. Station yourselves around the king, each of you with a weapon in hand. Anyone who approaches your ranks is to be put to death. Stay close to the king wherever he goes." The commander of units, verse 9, the commanders of units of 100 did just as Jehoiada the priest ordered. Each one took his men, those who were going on duty on the Sabbath, and those who were going off duty, and came to Jehoiada the priest. Then he gave the commanders the spears and shields that had belonged to King David, that were in the temple of the Lord. The guards had each, with the weapon in hand, stationed themselves around the king, near the altar in the temple of the south, from the south side of the Lord, on the south side to the north side of the temple. Verse 12. Jehoiada brought out the king's son and put the crown on him, and he presented with him a copy of the covenant and proclaimed him king. They anointed him, and the people clapped their hands and shouted, "Long live the king!" Verse 13. When Athaliah heard the noise made by the guards and the people, she went to the people at the temple of the Lord, and she looked, and there was the king standing by the pillar, as the custom was. The officers and the trumpeters were beside the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. Then Athaliah tore her robes and called out, "Treason! Treason!" Jehoiada the priest ordered the commanders of the units of 100 who were in charge of the troops, "Bring her out between the ranks, and put the sword to anyone who follows her." for the priest had said, "She must not be put to death in the temple of the Lord." So they seized her, and as she reached the place where the horses enter the palace grounds, there she was put to death. Verse 17. Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people that they would be the Lord's people. And they made a covenant between the king and the people. All the people of the land went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They smashed the altars and the idols in pieces and killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, in front of the altars. Then Jehoiada, the priest, posted guards at the temple of the Lord. He took with him the commanders of hundreds, the Karites, the guards, and the people of the land, and together they brought the king down from the temple of the Lord, and they went into the palace, entering by way of the gate of the guards. The king then took his place on the royal throne. Verse 20. All the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was calm, because Athaliah had been slain with the sword at the palace. Verse 21. Joash was 7 years old when he began to reign. Chapter 12. In the 7th year of Jehu, that's while Jehu is king in Israel, Joash is king in Jerusalem. In the 7th year of Jehu, Joash became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 40 years. His mother's name was Zebiah. She was from Beersheba. Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the years of Jehoiada. The priest instructed him. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. Verse 4. Joash said to the priests, "Collect all the money that is brought as sacrificed as sacred offerings to the temple of the Lord. The money collected in the census and money received from personal vows, and the money brought voluntarily to the temple. Let every priest receive the money from one of the treasurers. Then use it to repair whatever damage is found in the temple." Verse 6. By the 23rd year of King Joash, the priests had still not repaired the temple. Therefore King Joash summoned Jehoiada the priest and all the other priests and asked them, "Why aren't you repairing the damage done to the temple? Take no more money from your treasurers, but hand it over for repairing the temple." The priests agreed that they would not collect any more money from the people, and that they would not repair the temple themselves. Okay. Verse 9. Jehoiada the priest took a chest and bored a hole in its lid, and he placed it beside the altar on the right side as one enters the temple of the Lord. The priests who guarded the entrance put into a chest all the money that was brought to the temple of the Lord. Whenever they saw that there was a large amount of money in the chest, the royal secretary and the high priest counted the money that had been brought into the temple of the Lord and put it into bags. When the amount had been determined, they gave the money to the men appointed to supervise the work on the temple. With it they paid those who worked on the temple of the Lord, the carpenters, builders, and the masons and stone cutters. They purchased timber and blocks of dressed stone for the repair of the temple of the Lord, and met all the other expenses of restoring the temple. The money brought into the temple was not spent for making silver basins, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, or any other articles of gold or silver for the temple of the Lord. It was paid to the workers who used it to repair the temple. They did not require an accounting from those to whom they gave the money to pay the workers, because they acted with complete honesty. The money from the guilt offerings and the sin offerings was not brought into the temple of the Lord. It belonged to the priests. Verse 17. So things are working the way they're supposed to be working now, finally. You have good leadership. Verse 17. And about this time, Hazael, king of Aram, went up and attacked Gath and captured it. He returned to attack Jerusalem. But Joash, king of Judah, took all the sacred objects dedicated by his predecessors, Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, and Ahaziah, kings of Judah, and the gifts themselves, and dedicated all the gold found in the treasuries of the temple of the Lord and of the royal palace, and he sent them to Hazael, king of Aram, who then withdrew from Jerusalem. Verse 19. As for the other events of the reign of Joash and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? His officials conspired against him and assassinated him at Beth Millo, on the road down to Selah. The officials who murdered him were Jozabad, son of Shimeath, and Jehozabad, son of Shomer. He died and was buried with his ancestors in the city of David, and Amahaziah, his son, succeeded him as king. Chapter 13. In the 23rd year of Joash, son of Ahaziah, the king of Judah, Jehoahaz, some of these names are tricky, man, son of Jehu, became king in Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 17 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord by following the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit, and he did not turn away from them. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel, and for a long time he kept them under the power of Hazael, king of Aram, and Ben-Hadad, his son. Boy, that guy lived forever, didn't he? Verse 4. Then Jehoahaz sought the Lord's favor, and the Lord listened to him. For he saw how severely the king of Aram was oppressing Israel. The Lord provided a deliverer for Israel, and they escaped from the power of Aram. So the Israelites lived in their own homes as they had before. But they did not turn away from the sins of the house of Jeroboam, which he had caused Israel to commit. They continued in them. Also, the Asherah pole remained standing in Samaria. Verse 7. Nothing had been left of the army of Jehoahaz, except 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, and 10,000 foot soldiers. For the king of Aram had destroyed the rest and made them like dust at the threshing time. Verse 8. As for the other events in the reign of Jehoahaz, all he did and his achievements, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Jehoahaz rested with his ancestors and was buried in Samaria, and Jehoash, his son, succeeded him as king. Verse 10. In the 30th year of Joash, king of Judah, Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, became king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 17 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. He continued in them. Verse 12. As for the other events of the reign of Jehoash, all he did and his achievements, including his war against Amaziah, king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Jehoash rested with his ancestors, and Jeroboam succeeded him on the throne. Jehoash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. Verse 14. Now Elisha had been suffering from the illness from which he died. Jehoash, king of Israel, went down to see him and wept over him. My father, he cried, chariots and horsemen of Israel. Verse 15. Elisha said, Get a bow and some arrows. And he did so. And take the bow in your hands, he said to the king of Israel. When he had taken it, Elisha put his hands on the king's hands. Open the east window, he said, and he opened it. Shoot, Elisha said, and he shot. The Lord's arrow of victory. The arrow of victory over Aram, declared Elisha declared. Well, you will completely destroy the Arameans at Aphek. Verse 18. Then he said, take the arrows. And the king took them. Elisha told him, strike the ground. He struck the ground 3 times and stopped. The man of God was angry with him and said, you should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then you would have defeated Aram and completely destroyed it. But now you will defeat it only 3 times. Elisha died and was buried. Now, Moabite raiders used to enter the country every spring. Once, while some Israelites were burying a man, suddenly they saw a band of raiders. So they threw the man's body into Elisha's tomb. When the body touched Elisha's bone, the man came to life and stood up on his feet. Verse 22. Hazael, king of Aram, oppressed Israel throughout the region of Jehoahaz. But the Lord was gracious to them and had compassion and showed concern for them because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. To this day he has been unwilling to destroy them or banish them from his presence. Hazael, verse 24, Hazael, king of Aram, died, and Ben-Hadad, his son, succeeded him as king. Then Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, recaptured from Ben-Hadad, son of Hazael, the towns that had been taken in battle from his father Jehoahaz. 3 times Jehoash defeated him, and so he recovered the Israelite towns. Chapter 14. In the 2nd year of Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel, Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother's name was Jehoadan. She was from Jerusalem. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but not as his father David had done. In everything he followed the example of his father Joash. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. After the kingdom was firmly in his grasp, he executed the officials who had murdered his father the king. Yet he did not put the children of the assassins to death, in accordance with what is written in the book of the law of Moses, where the Lord commanded, parents are not to be put to death for their children, nor children to be put to death for their parents. Each will die for their own sin. Verse 7. He was the one who defeated 10,000 Edomites in the valley of Salt and captured Selah in battle, calling it Joktheel, the name it has to this day. Verse 8. Then Amaziah sent messengers to Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, king of Israel, with the challenge, come, let us face each other in battle. But Jehoash, king of Israel, replied to Amaziah, king of Judah, a thistle in Lebanon sent a message to a cedar in Lebanon. Give your daughter to my son in marriage. Then a wild beast in Lebanon came along and trampled the thistle underfoot. You have indeed defeated Edom, and now you are arrogant. Glory in your victory, but stay at home. Why ask for trouble and cause your own downfall, that you and that of Judah also? That's a question. In Judah also? Verse 11. Amaziah, however, would not listen to Jehoash, king of Israel. So Jehoash, king of Israel, attacked, and he and Amaziah, king of Judah, faced each other at Beth Shemesh in Judah. Judah was routed by Israel, and every man fled to his home. Jehoash, king of Israel, captured Amaziah, king of Judah, the son of Joash, and the son of Ahaziah, at Beth Shemesh. Then Joash went to Jerusalem and broke down the wall of Jerusalem from the Ephraim gate to the corner gate, a section about 400 cubits long. He took all the gold and the silver and the articles found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace. He also took hostages and returned to Samaria. As for the other events in the reign of Jehoash, what he did and his achievements, including his war against Amaziah, king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Jehoash rested with his ancestors and was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel, and Jeroboam his son succeeded him as king. Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, lived for 15 years after the death of Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel. As for the other events of Amaziah's reign, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? They conspired against him in Jerusalem, and they fled to Lachish, but they sent men after him to Lachish and killed him there. He was brought back by horse and was buried in Jerusalem with his ancestors in the city of David. Verse 21. Then all the people of Judah took Azariah, who was 16 years old, and then made him king in the place of his father Amaziah, when he was the one who rebuilt Elath and restored it to Judah after Amaziah rested with his ancestors. Verse 23. In the 15th year of Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, son of Jehoash, king of Israel, became king in Samaria and reigned 41 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and did not turn away from any of the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he caused Israel to commit. He was the one who restored the boundaries of Israel from Lebo Hamath to the Dead Sea, in accordance with the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, spoken through his servant Jonah, son of Amittai, the prophet from Gath-Hepher. Verse 26. The Lord had seen how bitterly everyone in Israel, whether slave or free, was suffering. There was no one to help them. And since the Lord had not said he would blot out the name of Israel from under heaven, he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, son of Jehoash. As for the other events of Jeroboam's reign, all he did in his military achievements, including how he recovered for Israel both Damascus and Hamath, which had belonged to Judah, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Jeroboam rested with his ancestors, the kings of Israel, and Zechariah, his son, succeeded him as king. Chapter 15. In the 27th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Azariah, son of Amaziah, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 16 years old when he became king. He reigned in Jerusalem 52 years. His mother's name was Jecholiah. She was from Jerusalem, and he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Amaziah had done. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. The Lord had afflicted the king with leprosy until the day he died, and he lived in a separate house. Jotham, the king's son, had charge of the palace, and the governor and the people of the land. Verse 6. As for the other events of Azariah's reign, and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Azariah rested with his ancestors and was buried near them in the city of David, and Jotham his son succeeded him as king. Verse 8. In the 38th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Zechariah's son of Jeroboam became king of Israel in Samaria. He reigned 6 months. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and his predecessors had done. He did not turn away from the sin of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. Shallum, son of Jabesh, conspired against Zechariah. He had attacked him in front of the people, assassinated him, and succeeded him as king. The other events of Zechariah's reign are written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel. So the word of the Lord spoken to Jehu was fulfilled. Your descendants will sit on the throne of Israel to the 4th generation. Verse 13. Shallum, son of Jabesh, became king in the 39th year of Uzziah, king of Judah, and the king of Samaria 1 month, and reigned in Samaria 1 month. When Menahem, son of Gadi, from Tirzah went from Tirzah up to Samaria. He attacked Shallum, son of Jabesh, in Samaria and assassinated him and succeeded him as king. Verse 15. The other events of Shallum's reign and the conspiracy he led are written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel. Verse 16. At that time, Menahem, starting out from Tirzah, attacked Tifsah and everyone in the city and its vicinity because they refused to open their gates. He sacked Tifsah and ripped open all the pregnant women. Verse 17. In the 39th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Menahem, son of Gadi, became king of Israel. He reigned in Samaria 10 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. During his entire reign, he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. Then Pul, king of Assyria, invaded the land, and Menahem gave him 1,000 talents of silver to gain his support and strengthened his own household on the kingdom. Menahem exacted his money from Israel. Every wealthy person had to contribute 50 shekels of silver to be given to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria withdrew and stayed in the land no longer. Verse 21. As for the other events of Menahem's reign, all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Menahem rested with his ancestors, and Pekahiah his son succeeded him as king. 23. In the 50th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekahiah, son of Menahem, became king of Israel in Samaria. He reigned 2 years. Pekahiah did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Imagine that. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. One of his chief officers, Pekah, son of Remaliah, conspired against him. Taking 50 men of Gilead with him, he assassinated Pekahiah, and along with Argob and Ariah, in the citadel of the royal place at Samaria. So Pekah killed Pekahiah. And succeeded him as king. Verse 26. The other events of Pekahiah's reign and all he did are written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel. Verse 27. In the 52nd year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekah son of Remaliah, became king of Israel in Samaria. He reigned 22 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he caused Israel to commit. Verse 29. In the time of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath Pileser, king of Assyria, came and took Ijon, Abel Beth Maacah, Janoah, Kadesh, and Hazor. He took Gilead and Galilee, including all the land of Naphtali, and deported the people to Assyria. Then Hoshea, son of Elah, conspired against Pekah, son of Remaliah. He attacked and assassinated him, and then succeeded him as king in the 20th year of Jotham, son of Uzziah. Now we're getting close to Isaiah's time. As for the other events of Pekah's reign and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? Verse 32. In the 2nd year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, Jotham, son of Uzziah, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. His mother's name was Jerusha, daughter of Zadok. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and just as his father Uzziah had done. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. Jotham rebuilt the upper gate of the people of the Lord. Rebuilt the upper gate of the people of the temple of the Lord. Verse 36. As for the other events of Jotham's reign and what he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? In those days the Lord began to send Rezin, king of Aram, to Pekah, son of Remaliah, against Judah. Jotham rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of David, the city of his father, and Ahaz, his son, succeeded him as king. Chapter 16. In the 17th year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, Ahaz, son of Jotham, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. Unlike David his father, he did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord his God. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel, and even sacrificed his son in the fire, engaging in the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. He offered sacrifices and burned incense at the high places, on the hilltops, and under every spreading tree. Verse 5. Then Rezin, king of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem and besieged Ahaz. But they could not overpower him at that time. At that time Rezin, king of Aram, recovered Elath from Aram by driving out the people of Judah. Edomites had moved into Elath and have lived there to this day. Verse 7. Ahaz sent messengers to say to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, I am your servant and vassal. Come up and save me out of the hand of king of Aram and the king of Israel, who are attacking me. And Ahaz took the silver and gold found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace, and sent it as a gift to the king of Assyria. The king of Assyria complied by attacking Damascus and capturing it. He deported the inhabitants to Kir and put Rezin to death. Verse 10. Then King Ahaz went to Damascus to meet Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria. He saw an altar in Damascus and sent to Uriah the priest a sketch of the altar and with detailed plans for its construction. So Uriah the priest built an altar in accordance with the plan with all the plans that King Ahaz had sent from Damascus and finished it before King Ahaz returned. When the king came back from Damascus and saw the altar, he approached it and presented offerings on it. He offered up his burnt offering and grain offering, and poured out his drink offering, and splashed the blood of his fellowship offerings against the altar. As for the bronze altar that stood before the Lord, he brought it from the front of the temple, from between the new altar and the temple of the Lord, and put it on the north side of the new altar. Verse 15. King Ahaz then gave orders to Uriah the priest on the large new altar, offer the morning burnt offering and the evening grain offering, and the king's burnt offering and his grain offering, and then he burnt and the burnt offering of all the people of the land, and their grain offering and their drink offering, and splash against this altar the blood of all the burnt offerings and sacrifices. But I will use the bronze altar for seeking guidance. And Uriah the priest did just as the king Ahaz ordered. Verse 17. King Ahaz cut off the side panels and removed the basins from the movable stands. He moved the sea from the bronze bulls that supported it and set it on a stone base. He took away the Sabbath canopy that had been built at the temple and removed the royal entryway outside of the temple of the Lord in deference to the king of Assyria. Verse 19. As for the other events of the reign of Ahaz and what he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Ahaz rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of David, and Hezekiah his son succeeded him as king. Chapter 17. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, Hoshea, son of Elah, became king of Israel in Samaria. He reigned 9 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, but not like the kings of Israel who preceded him. Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up to attack Hoshea, who had been Shalmaneser's vassal, and had paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria discovered that Hoshea was a traitor, for he had sent envoys. So the king of Egypt he no longer paid tribute to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore Shalmaneser seized him and put him in prison. The king of Assyria invaded the entire land and marched against Samaria and laid siege to it before the 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and deported the Israelites to Assyria. He settled them in Halah, in Gozan, on the harbor river, and in the towns of the Medes. All right, I'm going to pause just for a second to tell you guys that when we start, I'm going to try and point us back to here when we talk about the minor prophets, about Jonah and especially really the pre-exilic prophets. This would be their setting between the kings of Uzziah, like even the major prophets, Isaiah, and then like Isaiah seems to have like a 200-year life. I don't know how that works. I know that what I think is that he predicted what would happen. The critical scholars think that his story is a story, and I don't think like that. I think that Isaiah was a masterful prophet who probably didn't understand the prophecies that he was saying. Like, he calls out King Darius 200 years before Darius lives. And then, I mean, it's really that kind of strange. But you'll see that Isaiah's lifespan came from the king of Uzzah. We just talked about him a little while ago, to the king Manasseh, who was really evil, and the legend has it that he was sawn asunder, put in a log, and sawed in half. That's legend. That's not in the Bible. I mean, I think that might be in some of the what we call Apocrypha, or the the Apocrypha, the Apocryphal books, the Second Temple Judaism books that we don't accept as canon, and rightly so. They are good books. They're probably good books to read, but they're mostly history. They don't point us to Christ in any kind of way. So we don't mind leaving those out of the canon of Scripture. But I do want you to kind of note all of this time that we're reading about. See, when we get to the end of 2 Kings, we have all the narrative of history down, because this ends in Babylon. So when they go to Babylon and they come back, you have Ezra and Nehemiah rebuilding the new temple. That's the temple that Jesus came to. After the temple is destroyed, it's going to be destroyed here very soon, after the reign of Manasseh. But I just wanted you to bookmark this time, because this is the time you're going to hear about all of these prophecies, especially Amos, who goes and is a prophet to the northern kingdom from Jerusalem. It's all right. Back in verse 7, we're in 17, verse 7. All this took place because the Israelites had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up out of Egypt under the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. They worshipped other gods and followed the practices of the nations of the nations the Lord had driven out before them, as well as the practices of the kings of Israel that the kings of Israel had introduced. The Israelites had secretly done this against the Lord their God, that were not right. From watchtower to fortified city, they built themselves high places in all their towns. That means places to worship. That's what we keep saying, high places. High places is a place that they go to sacrifice. And that's where they would do that that's where they would do all kinds of crazy things. And they learned that from the crazy people. And that's what that just said. The high places in all their towns. Verse 10. They set up sacred stones and Asherah poles on every high hill, until under every spreading tree. At every high place they burned incense, as the nations whom the Lord had driven out before them had done. They did wicked things that aroused the Lord's anger. They worshipped idols though the Lord had said, "You shall not do this." The Lord had warned Israel and Judah through all his prophets and seers. Turn from your evil ways, observe my commands and decrees, in accordance with the entire law that I commanded your ancestors to obey, and that I delivered you through my servants, the prophets. But they would not listen, and they were as stiff-necked as their ancestors, who did not trust in the Lord their God. They rejected his decrees and the covenant they had made with them. He had made with their ancestors, and the statutes he had warned them to keep. They followed worthless idols, and themselves became worthless. They imitated the nations around them to do, although the Lord had ordered them, do not do as they do. Remember back in Joshua and Moses. They forsook all the commands of the Lord their God had made for themselves. 2 idols cast in the shape of calves. Remember, the first king of Israel set that up. And an Asherah pole. They bowed down to all the starry hosts, and they worshipped Baal. They sacrificed their sons and daughters in the fire. They practiced divination and sought omens, and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger. So the Lord was very angry with Israel, and removed them from his presence. Only the tribe of Judah was left. Assyria did that. Verse 19. And even Judah did not keep the commands of the Lord their God. They followed the practices of that Israel had introduced. Therefore the Lord rejected all the people of Israel, He afflicted them and gave them into the hands of the plunderers until he thrust them from his presence. Verse 21. Then he tore Israel away from the house of David. They made Jeroboam, son of Nebat, their king. Jeroboam enticed Israel away from following the Lord and caused them to commit a great sin. The Israelites persisted in all the sins of Jeroboam and did not turn away from them, until the Lord removed them from his presence, as he had warned through all his servants and prophets. So the people of Israel were taken from their homeland into exile in Assyria, and they are still there. Verse 24. The king of Assyria brought the people from Babylon, Cuthah, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim, and they settled them in the towns of Samaria to replace the Israelites. They took over Samaria and lived in its towns. When they first lived there, they did not worship the Lord. So he sent lions among them, and they killed some of the people. It was reported to the king of Assyria, "The people you deported and resettled into the towns of Samaria, who do not know the God of the country do not know what the God of the country requires." So he has sent lions among them, which are killing them off, because the people do not know what he requires. Verse 27. Then the king of Assyria gave this order: "Have one of the priests you took captive from Samaria go back to live there and teach the people what the God of the land requires." So one of the priests who had been exiled from Samaria came to live in Bethel and taught them how to worship the Lord. That would be Yahweh. You guys notice, if you're looking in your Bible at the last word, it says Lord capitalized. It has said that a lot. Okay, that is Hashem. That is the name of the Lord. That's the name that the Jews won't speak. It's capitalized here to let us know that should be Yahweh, YHWH in Hebrew. And there's a big difference between Yahweh, God, I am, the I am God, the name, Hashem, and any other little G, G-O-D. Verse 29. Nevertheless, each national group made its own gods in the several towns where they settled, and they set them up in the shrines the people of Samaria had made at the high places. The people from Babylon made Succoth Benoth, and those from Kathua made Nergal, and those from Hamath made Ashima. The Avites made Nibhaz and Terak, and the Sepharvites burned their children in the fire as sacrifices to Ardamalek and Anamalek, the gods of Sepharvaim. Those are all names of little g gods. Okay. Verse 32. They worshipped Yahweh, the Lord, but they also appointed all sorts of their own people to officiate for them as priests in the shrines of the high places. They worshipped the Lord, but they also observed their own gods in accordance with the customs of the nations from which they had been brought. So they only were worshiping God, our God, the God of Israel and Isaac and Jacob, Yahweh, so that they wouldn't get eaten by the lions. They would do whatever, and that's kind of what they knew, So let's keep going. Verse 34. To this day they persisted in their former practices. They neither worshipped the Lord, nor adhered to the decrees and regulations from the laws and commands that the Lord gave the descendants of Jacob, whom he named Israel. When the Lord made a covenant with the Israelites, he commanded them, "Do not worship any other gods or bow down to them, serve them, or sacrifice to them. But the Lord, Lord, who brought you up out of Egypt, might with mighty power and outstretched arm, is the one you must worship. To him you shall bow down, and to him offer sacrifices. You must always be careful to keep the decrees and regulations, the laws and commands he wrote for you. Do not worship other gods. Do not, remember how we talked about it? We said this over and over and over and over again back when Moses and Joshua were ruling Israel. Do not forget the covenant I've made with you, and do not worship other gods. Rather, worship the Lord, L-O-R-D, your God. It is he who will deliver you from the hand of all your enemies. Verse 40, they would not listen. However, but persisted in their former practices. Even while these people were worshiping the Lord, they were serving their idols. To this day, their children and grandchildren continue to do as their ancestors did. That is why the Jews did not like the Samaritans, or the Samaritans, because they were half-breed. You know, they were the northern kingdom had been taken away, and this is 700 BC time that the northern kingdom had been destroyed by Assyria. Okay, the southern kingdom, Judah, is still okay. The Babylon hasn't come yet, but now we're in 2 Kings 18, and this is Hezekiah, the best of the sons of Solomon. Chapter 18. In the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother's name was Abijah, daughter of Zechariah. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. He removed the high places, smashed the sacred stones, and cut down the Asherah poles. He broke into pieces the bronze snake Moses had made up for up to that time the Israelites had been burning incense to it. It was called Nehushtan. Now, do you remember back in Numbers 23, a long time ago? Okay, probably the first week, really, when we got into Numbers. The people had been bitten by serpents, and this is something that really just comes on through all the way when we start talking about Jesus. When we get to John 3, this is going to blow your mind. Okay, he broke the bronze serpent because people were worshiping it falsely, and like it was a god, like it was a little g god. They were burning sacrifices to the bronze serpent, which was never supposed to do. What were they supposed to do to it? If they got bit by a snake, they were supposed to look at it. Okay? And it's going to blow your mind when you look at when we get to John 3. Okay, so stay with us. All right. It was called Nehushtan. Verse 5. Hezekiah trusted the Lord, the God of Israel. There was no one like him among all the kings of Judah, either before him or after him. He held fast to the Lord and did not stop following him. He kept the commands of the Lord the Lord had given Moses, and the Lord was with him, and he was successful in whatever he undertook. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. From watchtower to fortified city, he defeated the Philistines as far as Gaza and its territory. Verse 9, in King Hezekiah's 4th year, which was the 7th year of Hoshea of Elah, king of Israel, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, marched against Samaria and laid siege to it. At the end of the 3 years, the Assyrians took it. So Samaria was captured in Hezekiah's 6th year. So that's 7-something BC. So we're in 700 BC. 720, I think. 722. Which was the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel. The king of Assyria deported Israel to Assyria and settled them in Halah, in Gozan, on the Habor River, in the towns of the Medes. This happened because they had not obeyed the Lord their God. That's it right there. But had violated its covenant, all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded. They neither listened to the commands nor carried them out. Verse 13. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah's reign, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, attacked all the fortified cities of Judah and captured them. So Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent this message to the king of Assyria at Lachish. I have done wrong. Withdraw from me. I will pray whatever you demand of me. The king of Assyria exacted from Hezekiah, the king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. So Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the temple of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace. At this time, Hezekiah, king of Judah, stripped off the gold which had covered the doors and doorposts of the temple of the Lord, and gave it to the king of Assyria. That's something else, man. Verse 17. Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, sent his supreme commander, his chief officer, and his field commander with a large army from Lachish to King Hezekiah at Jerusalem. They came up to Jerusalem and stopped at the aqueduct of the upper pool, on the road to the washerman's field. Verse 18. They called for the king and Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shibna, the secretary, and Joah, son of Asaph, the recorder, went out to them. Remember the name Asaph when we get into Psalms. The field commander said to them, Tell Hezekiah, this is what the great king, the king of Assyria, says. What are you basing this confidence of yours? You say that you have the counsel of the might and the might for war, but you speak only empty words. On whom are you depending that you rebel against me? Look, I know you are depending on Egypt, that splintered reed of a staff which pierces the hand of anyone who leans on it. Such is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who depend on him. But if you say to me, We are depending on the Lord our God, isn't he the one whose high places and altars Hezekiah removed, saying to Judah and Jerusalem, You must worship before this altar in Jerusalem? Verse 23. Come now and make a bargain with my master, the king of Assyria. I will give you 2,000 horses, if you can put riders on them. How can you repulse one officer of the least of my master's officials, even though you are depending on Egypt for chariots and horsemen? Furthermore, I have come back to attack and destroy this place without word from the... Have I come to attack and destroy this place without word from the Lord? The Lord himself told me to march against this country and destroy it. Verse 26. Then Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, and Shebna, and Joash said to the field commander, Please speak to your servants in Aramaic, since we understand it. Don't speak to us in Hebrew, the hearing of the people on the wall. But the commander replied, Was it only your master and you that my master sent me to say these things, and not to the people sitting on the wall, who like you will have to eat their own excrement and drink their own urine? Verse 28. Then the commander stood and called out in Hebrew, Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. This is what the king says. Do not let Hezekiah deceive you. He cannot deliver you from my hand. Do not let Hezekiah persuade you to trust in the Lord, when he says, The Lord will deliver us. Surely, this city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Verse 31. Do not listen to Hezekiah. This is what the king of Assyria says. Make peace with me and come out to me. Then each of you will eat fruit from your own vine and drink and fig tree, and drink water from your own cistern, until I come and take you to a land like your own, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey. Choose life and not death. Do not listen to Hezekiah. He is misleading you when he says the Lord will deliver us. Has the God of any nation ever delivered his land from the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad, Where are the gods of Sepharavim, Hena, and Evah? They have they rescued Samaria from my hand? Who of all the gods of these countries has been able to save his land from me? How then can the Lord deliver Jerusalem from my hand? Verse 36. But the people remained silent and said nothing in reply, because the king had commanded them, do not answer him. Verse 37. Then Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shibna, the secretary, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder, went to Hezekiah with their clothes torn and told him what the field commander had said. Chapter 19. When Hezekiah heard this story, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and went into the temple of the Lord. He sent Eliakim, the palace administrator, Shibna, the secretary, and leading priests, all wearing sackcloth, to the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz. They told him, this is what Hezekiah says. This day is a day of distress and rebuke and disgrace, as when the children come to the moment of birth, and there is no strength to deliver them. It may be that the Lord your God will hear the words of the field commander, whom is the master of the king of Assyria. He has sent to ridicule the living God. And that he will rebuke him for the words of the Lord your God has heard. Therefore pray for the remnant that still survives. Verse 5. When King Hezekiah's officials came to Isaiah, Isaiah said to them, tell your master, this is what the Lord says. Do not be afraid of what you have heard. Those words, which are the underlings of the kings of Assyria, has blasphemed me. Listen. When he hears a certain report, I will make him want to return to his own country, and there I will have him cut down with the sword. Verse 8. When the field commander heard that the king of Assyria had left Lachish, he withdrew and found the king fighting against Libnah. Now Sennacherib received a report that Tirkah, the king of Cush, was marching out to fight against him. So he again sent messengers to Hezekiah with this word. Say to Hezekiah, the king of Judah, do not let the God you depend on deceive you when he says, Jerusalem will not be given into the hands of the king of Assyria. Surely you have heard that the kings of Assyria have done to all the countries, destroying them completely, and will you be delivered? Did the gods of the nations that were destroyed by my predecessors deliver them? The gods of Gozan, Haran, Rezeph, and the people of Eden, who were in Tel Assar. Where is the king of Hamath, or the king of Arpad? Where are the kings of Lair, Sepharavim, Hena, and Evah? 14. Hezekiah received the letter from the messengers and read it. And then he went up to the temple of the Lord and spread out before the Lord. And Hezekiah prayed to the Lord, Lord, God of Israel, enthroned between cherubim, you alone are God over all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Give ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, Lord, and see. Listen to the words of Sennacherib has sent to ridicule the living God. Is it true, Lord, that the Assyrian kings have laid waste to these nations in their lands? Have they thrown their gods into the fire and destroyed them? Or were they, for they were not gods, but only wood and stone, fashioned by human hands? Now, Lord, our God, deliver us from his hand, so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone are the Lord, our God. Verse 20. Then Isaiah, son of Amoz, sent a message to Hezekiah. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I have heard your prayer concerning Sennacherib, king of Assyria. This is the word that the Lord has spoken against him. Virgin daughter Zion despises and mocks you. Daughter Jerusalem tosses her head as you flee. Who is it that you have ridiculed and blasphemed? Against whom have you raised your voice and lifted your eyes in pride? Against the Holy One of Israel. By your messengers you have ridiculed the Lord, and have said, with my many chariots I have ascended the heights of the mountains, the utmost heights of Lebanon. I have cut down its tallest cedars, and rejoiced in the choicest of its junipers. I have reached its remotest parts, the finest of its forests. I have dug wells in foreign lands, and drunk water there. With the soles of my feet I have dried up all the streams of Egypt. Verse 25. Have you not heard? Long ago I ordained it. In the days of old I planned it. Now I have brought it to pass, that you have turned fortified cities into piles of stone. Their people, drained of power, are dismayed and put to shame. They are like plants in the field, like tender green shoots, like grass sprouting on the roof, scorched before it grows up. But I know where you are, and when you come and go, and how you rage against me. Because you rage against me, and because your insolence has reached my ears, I will put my hook in your nose, and my bit in your mouth, and I will make you return by the way you came. Verse 29. This will be the sign for you, Hezekiah. This year you will eat what grows by itself. In the second year, what springs from that. But in the third year, sow and reap, plant vineyards, and eat their fruit. Once more, a remnant of the kingdom of Judah will take root below and bear fruit above. For out of Jerusalem will come a remnant, out of Mount Zion a band of survivors. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. Verse 32. Therefore this is what the Lord says concerning the king of Assyria. He will not enter this city, or shoot an arrow here. He will not come before it with shield, or build a siege ramp against it. By the way that he came, he will return. He will not enter the city, declares the Lord. Verse 34. I will defend this city and save it for my sake, and for the sake of David, my servant. Verse 35. That night the angel of the Lord went out and put to death 185,000 in the Assyrian camp. When the people got up the next morning, there were all the dead bodies. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, broke camp and withdrew. He returned to Nineveh and stayed there. One day, verse 37, one day, while he was worshipping in the temple of his god Nisroch, the sons of Adramelech and Sharezer killed him with the sword, and they escaped to the land of Ararat. And Esarhaddon, his son, succeeded him as king. Chapter 20. In those days Hezekiah became ill and was at the point of death, and the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, went to him and said, This is what the Lord says. Put your house in order, because you are going to die. You will not recover. Verse 2. Hezekiah turned his face to the wall and prayed to the Lord. Remember, Lord, how I have walked before you faithfully and with a wholehearted devotion, and have done this, what is good in your eyes. And Hezekiah wept bitterly. Before Isaiah had left the middle court, the word of the Lord came to him. Go back and tell Hezekiah, the ruler of my people, this is what the Lord says. This is what the Lord, the God of your father David, says. I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will heal you. On the third day from tomorrow you will go up to the temple of the Lord. And add 15 years to your life. I will deliver you and this city from the hand of the king of Assyria. I will defend this city for my sake and for the sake of my servant David. Verse 7. Then Isaiah said, Prepare a poultice of figs. And so they applied it to the boil, and he recovered. Now, listen. Poultice of figs is fig Newtons. And that does not cure cancer. But it did this time. Think about that. That's pretty cool. Verse 8. Hezekiah asked Isaiah, What will be the sign that the Lord will heal me, and that I will go up to the temple of the Lord on the 3rd day from now? Isaiah answered, This is the Lord's sign to you, that the Lord will do what he has promised. Shall the shadow go forward 10 steps, or shall it go back 10 steps? Verse 10. It is a simple matter for the shadow to go forward 10 steps, he said. Rather have it go back 10 steps. Verse 11. Then the prophet Isaiah called on the Lord, and the Lord made the shadow go back 10 steps. It had gone away on the stairway of Ahaz. It had gone down the stairway of Ahaz. That'd be crazy, isn't it? Look at your shadow and it just walk on its own. That's something else. Verse 12. At the moment, Marduk Baladan, son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent Hezekiah letters and a gift, because he had heard of Hezekiah's illness. Hezekiah received the envoys and showed them all that was in his storehouses: the silver, the gold, the spices, the fine olive oil, his armory, and everything found among his treasures. There was nothing in his palace or in all his kingdom that Hezekiah did not show them. Then Isaiah the prophet went to King Hezekiah and asked, What did those men say, and where did they come from? From a distant land, Hezekiah replied. They came from Babylon. The prophet asked, What did they see in your palace? They saw everything in my palace, Hezekiah said. There is nothing among my treasures that I did not show them. Verse 16. Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, Hear the word of the Lord. The time will surely come that when everything in your palace and all that your predecessors have stored up until this day will be carried off to Babylon. Nothing will be left, says the Lord. And some of your descendants, your own flesh and blood, who will be born to you, will be taken away, and they will become eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Verse 19. The word of the Lord you have spoken is good, Hezekiah replied, for he thought, Will there not be a place in security, peace and security in my lifetime? Verse 20. As for the other events of Hezekiah's reign, all his achievements, and how he made the pool and the tunnel which he brought water into the city, were they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Hezekiah rested with his ancestors, and Manasseh, his son, succeeded him as king. Well, that's all for today, guys. I lost my little red pencil. I'll find it. Alrighty. That's it for today. Man, Hezekiah was something else. He wasn't perfect, man, but he did more than any of the other kings. Now he's got a son, Josiah, that's really good after Manasseh. Manasseh's evil and bad. So there's like 2 more generations that happened before 586 BC. 586 BC is when Babylon finally carries off Jerusalem to Babylon, just like what Isaiah had told him would happen. That does happen eventually, but we've still got some time before that takes place. You know, all of this stuff is just degrading. It's coming down, man. You look back to the time of David when, and even Solomon, when Jerusalem was at its height. That was when it was at its peak of any time. And even after Rome came and man, just you can't imagine how great a civilization they had for a short period of time. We're only talking about 2 generations. Now, we've read about through 10 other generations of wickedness. So you had the time of the judges that was bad, and then you had 1st and 2nd Samuel, and you had 1st Kings, And then everything since then has just been a decline. David and Solomon were awesome, except for the latter part of Solomon's life when he really let it go. Well, guys, it's been a long day. Hope y'all have a wonderful day. I love you. I thank you for tuning in and keeping in reading the Bible with me. God loves you, and I love you too.